Okay, welcome to the show, Eden. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks so much for having me on with you today.
Yeah, no worries. So we're not drinking champagne. Sorry to disappoint
No.
anybody. But it's morning for you, and it's sort of afternoon for me on a Monday. So we have another beverage which has a really interesting history, actually. Coffee, which is I used to roast coffee actually, so I know quite a bit about it. But over to you.
Yeah, it's just for a general pick me up in the morning. And probably from someone who's used to roasting coffee, it's going to find this abhorrent because I drink instant. So if I drink anything stronger than that, it gives me a puts my head in the spin. So I know I'm the not the best way to first confession to start off with the day. But yeah, and I'm not ashamed of the fact
Hey,
that I
I
drink
don't
instant, but
judge.
it's
It
just
doesn't matter. I mean, I went to roasting. Then I've got my little pepper mill, so it's like a little handheld. You can probably hear it. It's like a giant pepper mill with a ceramic burr, and I use that to grind like better quality beans, and I just shove it in a French press, and that's what I do. So I'm pretty basic because I drink blacks. Over to you. Can you give us a quick like little summary about your career to date and what you're doing right now?
My name's Eden Bidani. I'm a conversion copywriter and messaging strategist, but I never thought I'd ever get into anything remotely related to marketing because I come from an anthropology background. So I thought marketing was the antithesis of everything that we were learning and studying in anthropology about empathy and about learning to appreciate people and see the world from their perspective. But when you look at it at the end of the day, good marketing is all about good communication. And that starts with understanding who you're talking to and what their perspective is of the world. So if you can understand that, then you can communicate to them and you can share with them share with them and you can teach them and educate them about this amazing product that you have, but in a way that's authentic and actually relevant to them. So not the direct response pressing all these emotional hot buttons to try and get people riled up and into whipped into a psychological frenzy to make them want to buy it, but actually saying, well, we have a great product. We know you have a need for a product. You take the lead, let the customer take the lead, really try to get on that deep level to understanding them and taking things from their point of view rather than trying to force something on the audience.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think one of the biggest things that I think people make who haven't studied marketing before is just that switch of perspective, which you just talked about, which is it seems so simple, but it's something everybody forgets. It's like it's not about you and your product; it's about them and what they want, and if you fit into that sphere of influence or not. And I think so many bad decisions are made by not understanding that very very simple fact. And I suppose that bleeds into copywriting, which is a lot of what you do as well at the more tactical level. Correct?
Yes, yeah, that's exactly it. So copywriting again, it's about messaging strategy and copywriting. It's about figuring out what we need to say based on what the customer wants to know and what they need to know as well. So it's balancing between what the company needs to say from from a business perspective, strategy perspective, differentiation perspective, from all for all of the different reasons that we have versus as well what the customer actually needs to hear or wants to hear or what they want to know about the product. Because what my company could say about the product and what the customer actually wants to hear about the product, there's a huge gap between them. Like, the company wants to say this much and the customer like, give me this much, and then I'll decide whether I want to learn more or not.
I suppose that brings me to the next point, which is like what is messaging strategy versus copywriting. There's other words like strategic narrative or headlines and all this kind of thing. Like if you had to define what messaging strategy is versus everything else, over to you, what would it be?
Absolutely. So the messaging strategy is understanding what you need to say. So what are those things that we need to say? The copywriting is how it's expressed. Now that how can change across because you have a different tone of voice for the website copy, a different tone of voice for social media channels, different tone of voice for all of the different applications. But you can even have different salespeople. Each of them have a slightly different pitch to each other, but at the same time, what are those key things, those key 3 to 5 points? What are those key messages that everyone is getting across, even if they put their own little spin on it, even if it gets changed and mixed up between the different channels. So what are those key messages that we're looking to communicate? And that's the core of what defining that messaging strategy is.
Okay, so it's more about the things that don't change throughout all the organization and the communication channels and tone changes that come with those channels. It's kind of like what stays the same almost.
Exactly. So it's the constant. So it's the positioning and it's that business strategy that's codified. Okay, what we need to say that the customers actually want to hear. And so it's keeping that focus on what the customers need to hear. So then again, the marketing materials are in alignment, sales are in alignment, customer success are in alignment. Everyone's in alignment with what we need to be communicating at any customer touch point.
So we talked about sort of copywriting and tone changes and that kind of thing, and your strategic narrative or storytelling. Like I hear this sort of getting sort of thrown around the traps a lot around, oh, we need to tell our brand story. There's like a strategic narrative that really is at the top of that brand piece that then filters down to everything else. What would you say to that? Like, is there a hierarchy here where everything fits into with all these terms? Because everyone gets confused about exactly what these terms mean.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a difference between a brand story and a strategic narrative. A strategic narrative, it's usually for internal purposes, and it is kind of that, it's that description, it's that explanation of what's happening in the world and how we fit into it, and then how we help our customers win, or how the world is changed, or how the world is a better place because we're in it. So it's that high level articulation of, again, what's the position in the market and how we fit into it as well. Brand story is something that can involve how the brand was formed, where it came from, what the founders were doing beforehand. So a brand story can be, or it can be more just playing on the emotions, touching on, it's usually very heavily focused on the emotions, or it's more something what you'd find on an About Us page of a website, rather than in a strategic narrative doc. So there is a difference between the two. And again, a strategic narrative, first and foremost, it's internal. So it's for internal alignment through C-suite, through different teams, through different departments within the company. At the same time, it's great. It's always something that's good to share with investors. It's good to share with when you're onboarding new employees, because it helps align them with the company's vision and the company's mission. So a strategic narrative, it's tied to company's vision and mission and unique positioning. Whereas brand story, it's more an expression of how the brand came to be, or the backstory of the brand. Again, that's how I see it. And then where it is today, or what's the vision for the future. So it's a little bit more softer, very much of a softer approach. Both of them use principles of storytelling. Again, strategic narrative, it has to read really well, for people to be able to understand. Has to be the ideas and the strategy within it have to be expressed very clearly and in a coherent, cohesive manner, in a logical manner. But the brand story, you have a lot more flexibility, again, because I think the brand story is part of one of the expressions of the strategic narrative.
To some people, that would say, "Oh, all this copywriting or strategic messaging is all really tactical. Like, don't worry about it. You don't have to do that. Just sell your product." What would you say to that? Is it strategic or is it tactical? And how do we tell the difference between when we're doing one or the other?
Yeah, absolutely. So the messaging and the strategic narrative, the vision, mission, all of that is very strategic. And the copywriting is then how it's expressed. So its copywriting is very tactical. It's what appears on your website, what appears on your landing pages, what appears in your emails, what appears in your ads, or what appears in the customer-facing marketing assets. Sure, your vision and mission might make it from your core messaging, from your messaging strategy onto your website at some point on the company About Our Founders page, something like that. But it's not the main focus of what goes on the website. For example, you don't go to a homepage of a website and you get hit with 3 paragraphs talking about the company's positioning in terms of the wider global landscape. You might find some of that bits and pieces on other pages of the website. But again, the copywriting, again, is the tactical expression of the strategy of the messaging.
Sure. So what happens then if we don't invest in that sort of higher order messaging strategy? What are the sort of symptoms that happen? Like if we just start writing off the top of our heads, or, we hire a writer, but they don't really know that sort of top level piece. What happens and where does it go wrong?
Absolutely. Usually where it happens, and when you find what's most difficult, is that there's a huge then misalignment between what the founders or what the company thinks it wants on the website and what the copywriter thinks needs to be on the website. So a copywriter is usually, they're very much in tune anyway with what an audience wants or needs, and the company has an idea what they want to communicate. But you find it when you get to the first kind of iterations of the copy, for no matter what it is you're writing, and say, well, this doesn't feel right, or this isn't in the right direction, so they feel that something is off. So that's one example when they're working with a copywriter and they feel that something is off. So they understand that the copywriter doesn't see what they see, but at the same time, the copywriter sees something else that they don't see, which is their customers, the application of their customers. So they're trying to take the founder's thoughts, which are kind of all scrambled and not, the founder of the company's thoughts, which are all kind of mixed up, and trying to put that in and trying to prioritize what needs to be said first, second, and third based on just the conversations they've had with the company. But there's no strategy to that, so they can pick and choose anything they want, and the company then doesn't they feel it's not right, but they don't know where to put their finger on it. And the same thing then happens when they're working on their marketing assets. So every time they need to write a landing page or they need to write an email, they go, what do we have to write? Like, what do we actually write? And then they start mincing or mixing up between the value propositions. So they might try to chunk all the value propositions into one cold email, when it's really hard to do that in a cold email to get anyone to read that. Or you'll see blog posts or
Yep.
landing pages that are just so long because they're trying to put everything about the company in one spot instead of narrowing the focus down to maybe one of the value props that they have out of several. And they're not testing the individual value props as well. They're just trying to chunk everything, say everything about the company, every single customer touch point, and every single time. So it just comes out as a right mess. They don't know what they need to be putting in their marketing materials, and then customers have no idea what they do as well as a company, because it's when you get this mess. They just feel it's a real struggle. It's a real struggle because you feel like you don't know what direction you should be going in, and then you can't test your messaging properly. You can't really market effectively because you don't know what you should be saying to whom
Yeah.
and to when.
You've obviously done this like many times. You've probably seen people who have tried to do it without hiring a professional versus perhaps hiring someone like you. What is the upside of getting that right? Like, is there sort of some facts and figures or before and after states that you can sort of say, hey, from my experience, if you don't do this, you're going to be, 2x lower, or you're going to, forfeit a 10x improvement in your landing page conversions or something like that? Like, do you have any examples from your history?
I don't necessarily have a clear stat that I can think of off the top of my head. Oh, I do have one that I can quote, but it's again, it's so hard because it's almost hard. They understand the marketing's not working. It's like, but what in the marketing isn't working? What is working? What isn't working? There's just so much confusion that it's even really hard to measure what little success there is. But having clarity in the messaging, having a messaging strategy, and then applying it, you can see it's very clear. It provides an excellent user experience on the pages. You see time on page increase. You see scroll depth increase on the different pages. For example, you see, engagement time goes up, quality score of ads and landing pages and things like that go up. So, it costs you less to show your ad to more people, and to get more people through the landing page. And of course, conversions also go up. So you do see things like that. I'll give you an example. I was working with a company a couple of years ago, and they were struggling to pin down what is that thing that we need to communicate. And they were throwing out, it's like, we do it faster, it's easier, it's like they couldn't actually figure out what it was to settle on. And so in the end, we just went with the absolute most simplest headline on their homepage. The simplest expression of what they do is just that they make working with freelancers easier. And so that became the headline for the entire homepage of the website. There's an easier way to work with freelancers. And changing that hero section, so the CMO that I was working with, it changed the hero section, and having that as the headline in the hero section, just emphasizing the ease of use, making that again the core differentiator and the core value, making the core value proposition. The time on page doubled, the scroll depth doubled, and it was fantastic. It's like you could see it immediately, just having that clarity of messaging, not trying to say everything at the same time in one little space. It led to some really interesting results.
Yeah, it reminds me of simplicity. That sort of stoic sort of philosophy of rooting down to that essential thing and not trying to overcomplicate it. Because when a product does multiple things, everyone wants to add every single thing that the product does, and it becomes a lot harder to then distill it down to like one thing that overarches all those sub points. And I think sometimes when you hit on that, it's just you don't need to talk about the subpoints because it's kind of assumed almost in that sort of bigger umbrella term. So I really like that example.
Right.
But on this point, I think there's this term that goes around called product market fit, right? Which is how well or how congruent is our offering to the needs of the market. I think sometimes what gets lost though is that there is another thing, and correct me if you don't agree with this. There is something called message market fit, or even message channel fit. So having the right message to the right market. So it's kind of like taking that product offering, translating it into a message that then communicates that product benefit and value proposition to the market, and then also then messaging that sort of fits each of the channels that we may be using at any one time, which is again in a sort of a lower order thing. Would you agree with that? Like, can you have product market fit, but then your message market fit is the problem that no one wants to admit to, that is causing that choke point?
I do agree with that, actually. I think there is, because different markets will see different value in your product, at the end of the day. Yes, you might have an overarching value, and that's usually when, if you have a product that does multiple things, or a company has multiple products, then they usually try to steer them away to. So you need to have a brand. You need to focus on brand differentiation necessarily than product differentiation. When you get down to the product level, then you can talk more about that. But if you're trying to communicate for the company as a whole, you need to take it the level higher, and you need to be talking about, from a brand perspective, even more in brand differentiation. But when you get back to it, a lot of it is about, they're not saying the right thing to the right people. So you have people who are looking for something for a platform that makes it easy for them to work with freelancers, but they get on this page, it says something else entirely. It says take the headaches away. It's like, I'm not looking to take the headaches away. Like, they're looking for the word easy. Like, they want to know if it's easy. Whereas someone else is looking to save time. They're not necessarily looking for something that might be easier to start with. They're looking for something that communicates to them the value of time. So if you have a variation of the homepage that speaks to them, that talks about the time that it saves you, that this new platform saves you about the time, it can also resonate for them. So it's about having that message market fit. There are different things that people see, different types of value, that your customers will see in the product. A lot of the time, it's very clear what that value is, and then we can get to that value by using jobs to be done. So again, it's not trying to narrow. It's not trying to narrow it down too much, but actually taking it. So what's the common denominator between all these different types of markets and the different value that they're looking for? What's that common denominator between them all?
Yep.
So again, getting to jobs to be done. What is that ultimate transformation that they're looking for? And if you communicate that, then you can start at the top, and then you can say, okay, it's easy, it saves you time, it does this and this and this. And so then you're able to communicate all of those things at the same time, but still get the key message across at the same time, I find. But just that message market fit is so crucial often, and it impacts product market fit, because people will think your product isn't for them, but it's just because you're not communicating the right thing that it's often why they come to that conclusion.
And I think that raises another good point around maybe they have some internal staff that are doing, tactical comms, communication, or lead gen, or whatever. They might have an agency that sort of helps them execute some of these things, but I've rarely seen them invest in copywriting. It's sort of like it's an inclusion with an agency contract, or is this an expectation on someone who may not be a copywriter internally to do this? And I find this messaging strategy key piece, unless they've hired a strategist or someone like yourself, it sort of gets overlooked. So where should we be sourcing messaging strategy from? Like, should it be coming in a core strategy sort of workshop package, or should we be asking for it from our agencies? Or like, maybe we have this gap, what do we do about it? What would you recommend?
So again, it depends on what kind of partners that they're working with. There are some companies, if they have large enough marketing teams and product marketing teams, they'd prefer to workshop through it, because then it gives them the tools how to work on their own messaging, how to keep update, when to constantly update, and it gives them the tools, and then they don't need to keep hiring someone else to do it for them. And as well, when they have a new product release or a new feature release, then they know exactly how to go back and see if things are in line with our own strategy. So that's really useful for them. If they have large marketing teams, it's great. If they have large marketing teams, but they're short on time, or they don't have someone with that expertise, or it's going to take too long for the workshop, the effects of the workshop or the learnings of the workshop to take a hold, and they need to rebrand or reposition quickly, then it's usually a good time to ask the agency that they're working with, or to try and outsource, to an external messaging strategist. I think the one benefit that I've seen, and again, I'm biased as an external vendor, but the one thing that I've seen, in all the years of working with companies, is that as an as a completely external, as an external set of eyes, you really uncover some key insights when you're able to see everything totally objectively. You come across some amazing things. I was working with, for example, a company last year. They were pitching themselves as a tech company, and they provided technology for credit providers and small private banks and things like that. But when I interviewed the entire founding team, I interviewed the head of marketing, I interviewed everyone there, and I interviewed some of the customers, and I came back to them and said, "You guys, you're not a tech company. You're a service company that provides tech solutions." And it was like, then the penny dropped, and they were like, "That's why because for years they've been positioning themselves based on the value of the tech products that they were providing their customers, but those tech products would change." So they were third-party vendors. Their tech products would change over time, and so they were always trying to be in quick step with what to try and keep their messaging updated and keep it relevant. But then it was customers still didn't get the value of what they do. And it's like, well, just coming from that outside perspective, it was like, no, you're not actually a tech company. You have tech solutions that you provide, but you're actually a services company. And that was a huge revelation for them, because looking from the inside, they could only see themselves as the value based on the value of their the tech products that they were selling on.
Yeah, that reminds me of another client I had a couple of years ago. Yeah, same sort of thing. I think some people just call themselves a tech company to get tech company valuations, if you know what I mean. But underneath, like, tech is just a facilitator of their actual product offering. So, like, I think distilling down to, like, what are you actually providing, and then does tech facilitate that, or is it a platform that helps facilitate that higher order service? I think that's the sort of main thing. But it happens all the time. I really like that story, actually. But you must see this go wrong. Like, that was maybe one example where they sort of just are off in terms of their framing or their approach to their messaging. So what are they sort of common failings you must see of companies who get this wrong over and over and over, and you just keep coming across these things all the time in your line of work? So then if we know those things, we can help avoid them.
Absolutely. I think the first and the biggest mistake that everyone makes is, is they don't talk enough to customers. So they say they talk to customers, and they say they put customers first, but they don't talk to their customers enough. They really don't. You really should be having regular interactions with the customers, and that, I think, that applies to everyone from C-level down to of course the actual frontliners in a business. I think, which CEO was it? CEO of DoorDash or something. Sometimes goes on deliveries. Business from Amazon. He still reads customer support emails from time to time. And that's impressive. Just reads them because he wants to understand what people are, asking questions about, what's going on, what do they want, what are they looking for help with, which is fascinating, which says a lot about the company. It shows that the company is really focused on the customer and not just what we want to do as a company. It's trying to tap into, or what do people really need? What are they looking for, and how can we help them better? So that's the first one, is just they don't talk enough to customers, which leads into problem number 2, is just that they assume too much. And the assuming too much comes from, it's assuming they know what their customers want. It's assuming that their customers have the time and energy to invest in learning about, educating themselves about the product, because they don't. They rarely do, unless the customer is significantly motivated to want to learn more about a product. You have to get someone on a 30-minute demo today. 30 minutes is a lot of time. It's a lot of time in someone's schedule. A 30-minute call, and there's time before and after the call where we're all over the place, but 30-minute demo is a lot of time out of someone's very busy day. They have to be significantly motivated to want to click through. So it's not just how great your product sounds. You actually have to encourage them, motivate them to want to participate in the demo in the first place. And the pull of the product isn't always the thing that does that. So it comes down again to not speaking enough to customers, and then to making too many assumptions. And the third one as well is not doing enough testing. So they're not running enough ad variations. So they might have 2 or 3 winning ad variations, but they're not testing different ads with just a single value proposition. So they're trying to stuff everything again into an ad or into a landing page, and it's working, which is great. Doesn't mean stop it, but you should actually try and see if you can narrow that down or separate out the value propositions and see if you can get even bigger wins by testing the messaging. By running separate campaigns and actually comparing the results against each other. That will give you, again, that keeps giving you consistent feedback as to what you need to be saying then in your ads and landing pages and your emails. So if you see as the rate, as the conversion rates go up and down, as they fluctuate over time, then you know what you can test next and what you should be testing next in order to help bring conversion rates back up.
Yeah, great. I really like that last example because I've done that with sales teams before. So, you data mine what the objections are, or sometimes you listen back to the interviews and they say it sometimes better than you can say it. So, sometimes, you experiment with a couple of things in a sales conversation and something just clicks and it sort of makes sense to them. And they use that phrase and you're like, actually, that's a really good phrase. And then you use that in the next call and just, the customer just instantly understands what you're talking about and can sort of place you in a category and gets what your product does and why it's valuable to them. And I'm like, okay, let's iterate on that theme. You know what I mean? So just that, sometimes that research piece is really key, I find, to then giving you ideas to then iterate on. And I think without that, you're just sort of like stuck in that test phase of your original assumption, a headline. You're just iterating within that sort of one area instead of going way outside that into maybe something you'd never say. So I find people sometimes get box holed as well into this little circle.
So the story you shared reminded me of another client I've been working with recently. So they, and they had a strategic narrative that was almost all the way there. They were very close. They needed just help, polishing it and getting it over the final line because there were a few little holes still left in it. And one of the things that came up across in the research when I was speaking with the founder and speaking with, the head of revenue, first of all, they were having trouble communicating that they weren't just a one and done thing, that they were a consistent, you can get a subscription, you can have consistent assets produced for you, regularly, which is a huge benefit for them, but they weren't seeing the value and why they needed that. Customers weren't seeing why they would need more than one of what they were offering. So when I was looking at the research and I was looking at what their customers saying, we came across this notion of, well, there's a trust gap. There's trust gaps, or there's more than one trust gap. It's not just you have a trust. It's not just you build trust once with the customer and then they're ready to buy from you. It's like it's a consistent process throughout, awareness, consideration to conversion, where you have to keep presenting yourself as an authoritative, as a reliable, as a trustworthy solution at every single touch point along the way. So there's lots of gaps. It's not just, one gap that you need to close it and they're ready to buy from you. So there's lots of little gaps along the process. And so we said, you need to talk about that there's more than one gap. So don't say, so again, you can say the way you close these gaps is through what we offer you. But again, there's more than one gap. It's not just a one and done thing. And I just got an email from the head of revenue a couple of days ago, and he said, yeah, we've been implementing it already in our sales calls, in that idea of trust gaps and more than one. And again, they're seeing really good. He didn't give me the exact numbers. He's like, we're getting really good feedback from it. So it's working already, which is great to hear. So it's, again, a small shift.
Oh, that's great.
A small shift. Talking about, it's not a huge shift. It's not like we came up with this new term that didn't exist before, or we came up with something. But again, we talk about trust gaps. It's something, as you mentioned, people immediately understand what you're talking about. It's a very clear term. It's something very easy to remember. It's very easy to explain, and it kind of explains itself. But positioning the company as a solution to solving all of these little gaps, rather than just solving one gap, is working in their favor.
Love that. Hey, so you just mentioned on that point some of your process, which perhaps starts with research, right? And getting rid of some of those assumptions. But if you could just run us through, pretend that I'm a business and I think I have this problem and I'm reaching out to you as a messaging strategy professional going, can you help us? And I want to ask you, okay, what's your sort of process? without you revealing your secret sauce, but like, what is a general process that doesn't change no matter how small or large the business is? And perhaps where you start, where you finish, and then maybe if you have a higher budget or a bigger company, some additional things you do at some of those steps or extra steps at the end. Can you just run us through what that would look like if we engaged you?
So I think the core. So usually when I'm working with clients, it depends on what we're looking to work on. I usually rarely work on just messaging strategy. It's usually messaging strategy, and then at least we have some assets where, like a homepage and about us page, or even website copy, or something where that messaging has been expressed. So you do get so the core process happens across three things. So we have initial research and discovery, then we have writing and implementation, and then we have validation. So the first process, again, the research and discovery, that doesn't change. That has to be constant for everyone. Whether I'm working with just about to launch startup through to an enterprise company. Although enterprise companies usually have something already. So usually that research and discovery process, it's intense interviews with key stakeholders. It's trying to understand the market. It's understanding the market. So looking at the competitive marketplace, looking at how other companies are positioning themselves, to understand how we should as well be positioning ourselves with respect to the product or the company's actual features and solutions, as well as trying to get as close to the customers as possible. So for a startup that's just about to launch, we don't really have anyone that we can talk to, but you can go looking for the voice of the customer, for references from customers almost anywhere online. So you can go to Reddit, Facebook, LinkedIn. You can look and hear from people and what their problems are without actually speaking to them. But when a company has customers, I love to speak to their customers, because you just uncover so many amazing insights from speaking with them. And as well, being an external party to the company, it means the customers feel very comfortable sharing with you things that they might not be sharing with someone that they have a working relationship with.
Yep, that's a very good point.
They feel very comfortable sharing their honest, open feedback. Yeah. And then it's taking all of that, having an understanding, doing a comparison as well, just from a brand perspective, what other people are putting on their websites, what they're saying on their websites, what images even they're using in the hero sections, and then coming away with understanding, okay, so we know what we need to say. We have so if they need the vision, mission, strategic narrative, that's when that happens as well, and that usually happens in workshops done with the founder or key stakeholders, and that comes out of that. At the same time, we have in that the key value proposition. So key positioning comes out of that. We have the key value proposition. So I like to split value propositions along emotional and practical. I think there's both. The emotional then can be expressed as brand values, but these are the emotional reasons why people buy from you. At the same time, you have the practical, or you can say economic or logical reasons why people might buy. It's faster, it's smarter, it's better, it's, whatever. The emotional reasons, again, it's aligning with the jobs to be done, what they're actually looking for, their ultimate transformation. So once we have that vision, mission, strategic narrative, we know what we need to say in terms of value propositions, both emotional and practical. It's very easy to take that and start running with it, start applying it to different customer-facing channels. When you have, again, that messaging strategy, it does, again, trickle down to everything that you do. It helps keep you in the right, it makes sure that you're hitting all those right notes, no matter what marketing assets then you're creating. And then, of course, in that final step, it's getting that validation. So before we even get to writing any marketing assets, I usually tell the salespeople, I tell the client, start using this core messaging, give it to your salespeople, tell them to start using it, give it to people in other people in marketing, tell them to start using it now, so that we can start getting feedback on it already. And usually they use it, they implement it very quickly, and so that helps validate it for as we're writing and creating those marketing assets. So it's kind of a linear process, but at the same time we are doing a lot of validating at the same time as we're doing the writing for the marketing assets.
That sounds pretty awesome. So yeah, look, on that line, I know you mentioned before some success cases of before and afters, but if you were creating that business case and selling that to somebody, like for example, let's just say I'm a CMO or a senior marketer inside the firm, and I know that we have this problem with messaging strategy. I realize that maybe I'm not 100% qualified in that area. Like, yeah, I can write, but I don't really have enough experience in doing that. And I want to make the case for hiring someone such as you or an agency or whatever that can help us with that. I mean, how would you pitch that business case so we can get that political buy-in?
I think the first point to clarify is not necessarily everyone thinks it's a messaging problem. If someone is really clued in and they know that it's a messaging problem, they'll go out looking for a messaging strategist. I think one of the things is that they'll think they need help with copywriting, but what they often really need is help with a messaging strategy. So they're struggling with writing or creating marketing assets, but that's not because they don't have competent writers on their team, or it's not because they couldn't do it themselves. It's because they haven't figured out what they need to say first, and so they can't write because they haven't figured out what they need to say. So I think sometimes I come in when I'm speaking with a lot of clients, I say, look, it's if you're struggling with what you even need to say, then we need to look at doing messaging strategy. And they go, oh yeah, well, I could write this, but I can't because I don't know what I need to say. And so it's a bit different way of making the business case. But for absolutely in terms of messaging strategy, you immediately see better results from sales because they start implementing the messaging. They're the front line, they're closest to the customer. They start implementing the messaging right away. So you start to see, more closed won deals very quickly, or more demos, more sales activities is the first thing that you start to see. At the same time with the messaging, then you with applying the messaging and then through copywriting, you see better conversion rates usually across the board. So you see more book demos, you see more traffic, see more time on page, you see better improvement for the ads. The customer acquisition score has gone down because it costs less to get your ads in front of the right people. And all those kinds of things. You see better engagement on social media posts, more follows on social media. It's really far reaching, the impacts of having that right messaging. It's so very powerful. So I think one of the tricky things just about messaging strategy, unless the CMO is totally clued in on the messaging strategy, or the CMO has experience with messaging and strategy themselves, they don't always know that it's a messaging problem. So there's an element of education that often happens in the process. They'll come and they'll say, well, we're struggling with writing our marketing assets, like we need help writing marketing assets. Then you hop on a call with them and you say, well, why are you having this problem? So, well, we don't know what to say. And so, well, if you don't know what to say, that means you have actually a messaging problem. So sometimes then the light switch on is out, oh yeah, that's it. We've been struggling with our positioning. Well, a copywriter can help fix that, but you need to have a messaging strategy first in order to make sure that you know what to say in the copy again. So then it's that process. So it's not always straightforward. Not many people go, I need to hire a messaging strategist. They go, I'm having problems with copy, or I don't know what to write, or I don't know how to write this, or no one on the team knows what they're doing, or we're writing stuff and it's not working. And so they think they need a copywriter, whereas sometimes they do need it. So it's a little bit of sometimes it's a sideways kind of pitch in order to get to that. But at the end of the day, in terms of the general business case, the things that they see beforehand, they'll see it's poor engagement with marketing assets, low book demos, low sales activity, low conversion rate. Again, low conversion rates and sales activity is not always it's not always a direct thing, because you can have low conversion rates and high sales activity. So the few that are coming in are closing, and that's fine. It's working. It means what you're doing is working, so you just have to scale it. But if you've got high conversion rates and then no zero sales activity, so there's problems happening. So marketing is over promising and sales is not following, or there's a gap between what marketing says and what sales actually says about the product. So then you know that there's problems that comes down to messaging strategy. What do you need to say? Not just copywriting. So you'll see, again, low sales activity, you'll see low engagement, but generally difficult or low performance from marketing assets across the board. And in terms of the results that you can see, it goes across everything. It goes from higher on-page conversion rates, higher engagement rates, higher traffic, kind of those top metrics. But you'll also see more closed demos, more closed won opportunities, and I guess more closed won deals as well at the same time. So you'll just see and often you'll see that the speed to close. The time to close and time from when someone became a lead to closing is also much shorter usually. So it's instead of being like 6 months,
Yep.
it maybe takes 1 to 3 months, which is huge. If you can land if you can land a large client in 1 to 3 months versus 6 months, then it's a huge difference. So you see all those kinds of results
Hey,
from
so
implementing the right messaging. Again, to your point, message market fit rather than necessarily product market fit.
I love that. And so, one other thing I find in this area, marketing at large, but also messaging strategy, is that there tends to be a lot of misconceptions around this. You did mention before this trying to fit all the sort of key points or product features on a page. And then because it's so long, that higher order value proposition kind of gets lost in the weeds and people just don't know what it does. So, sometimes saying less can be more effective than saying more. And also, sometimes when you do your research piece, these two things can look identical, but one's backed by customer research, will be very effective, and the other one also sounds good, but isn't effective because there's no base from where it comes to. So that congruence between what the market wants isn't there. So are there sort of some common misconceptions that we can kind of dispel about what you do right now? If you had a top three, what would they be?
I think at least the top one, as you mentioned, as you just touched on it just there, is that often there's that conception, was that expectation that sometimes copy is, I don't know how to explain it. It's like it's this wonderful creative thing. It's like this one, it's like Apple copy. It's like, oh, it's 2 words and it's like, oh, it's beautiful and everyone's gonna buy it because of these 2 words. I think a lot of really effective copy, it's ugly because it's not ugly because it's like it's not necessarily ugly. You can find a nice way of expressing it, but it's words taken from the customer's own mouth as much as possible, and that's not as polished all the time as what my company might want to say. But you know what?
Mm-hmm.
It's what works. So there's often this thing that marketing, and again, this is why a lot of marketers struggle with their copywriting because they try to polish it. We want it to sound slick. We want it to sound sophisticated and cool. It's like, but in doing that, you lose the interest of the people because it sounds like marketing. People resonate with things that don't sound like marketing to them, and if you tap into the customer's own words as much as possible, that's great. Brand awareness campaign, fine. Be as sophisticated, as clever, use alliteration, use that. Yep, there's a time and place for that, for the fancy stuff. And I agree, there's a very valuable place for that in marketing. But if you're looking to improve that sales impact, if you're looking to, increase conversion rates, it's usually the ugly copy that
Mm-hmm.
that performs better. So I think that's usually the top one.
Okay. What's another misconception then? Is there another one? Like, is it sort of like length of copy or conciseness, or would it be? I know you mentioned. I
Yeah.
saw one of your posts a little while ago. It was really funny. You said, "Don't be afraid of being direct and selling." So that Jay Abram says sometimes the best way to sell a horse is to write "horse for sale."
Yeah. So sometimes again, there's sometimes again if there's a gap between marketing and sales within the organization. So marketing will feel, well, it's not our job to sell, and sales will be, well, it's not our job to market. Like the customer should come through with some knowledge of what we do before they find themselves in a demo. Otherwise, we won't be able to sell to them. But often marketing, like they're trying to detach, it feels detached very much sometimes from that outcome. But sometimes you just need, if that message is clear, if there is a real need in the market, you sometimes just need to come out with that one single clearest expression of what you do. As in the other case of the freelancer platform, it was, there's an easier way to work with freelancers. It was like so everything else, forget about it. There is an easier way, and it was like, we weren't necessarily we weren't bashing competitors, we weren't doing any. It was just what like we know that you're dealing with other solutions, hack together solutions. There is a better way. And so it was just shining that light on that there is the potential for a different solution. And so I think that's just that simplicity sometimes of that message, that one thing that you do really well, and shining that light on it, it makes a huge difference. And the third thing, as you pointed, as you did also touch on before, it's the length of copy. Length is not relevant. How concise the copy is. So length is relevant when you're looking at, again, if you're looking at brand awareness versus the sales page versus, there's all kinds of things where length does come into play. But the more expensive the product, the more uneducated the customer, the longer the buying cycle usually is, the more sophisticated the audience in terms of their general knowledge, the more copy you need to explain the value of your product. You have to tell them more. You can't expect people to drop, That's why we click on a Facebook ad and you get this like endless scroll page for this coaching course that it's like, I don't know, $3,000 or $10,000 or whatever. And you go, wow, but there's like, the page is this long and it makes you see that the offer looks really attractive because the page is so long. But if the page was this long and it was still a $10,000 offer, you would be like, there's something going on here. Like just that length and that amount of explanation and effort they go into explaining helps prove the value, prove the weight of the value of the offer, helps it prove its dollar value. But if you're going for brand awareness, if you're going for that, yes, you can experiment with short copy. But if you're looking to drive conversions, you need to consider, what do people want to know or need to know again. So length, sometimes people get so focused on it needs to be short. It's like, it needs to be concise. You need to say, short copy can also be long. It can take a long time to read if people don't understand what it's saying, if it's too vague, if it's too waffly. Long copy can also take a long time to read if it's also vague and waffly. Both of them could be vague and waffly. So what you're looking at again is just, don't focus on the length. It's about how concise, are you saying a complete thought? Are you sharing that complete thought in the most concise way possible?
I had this exact experience literally last night. I had to judge some award submissions for a tech awards. So I had 8 submissions, right? And there's 4 sections. There's like dot point criteria under each of these 4 sections. I had to score them out of, so many points, and then aggregate points sort of would win. And it was amazing. The winner actually wrote one of the longest submissions, but it was so clear and so concise that I could just tick off all the criteria. And I was like, I could read it easily, even though it was long, I could read it quickly. There's another one that was too short and didn't say enough, so it didn't address the criteria. And it was sort of generalist. So that was really short. And I was like, well, that doesn't meet those criteria. So I couldn't get that. And there was another one that was quite short, but very concise, but met all the criteria. It's like they just condensed it all down. I'm like, that was easy to read. So they came second. And then the other ones ranged in length. And it was just buzzwords and fluffy kind of stuff. And it didn't really, I had to keep rereading it going, what are they trying to say here? Like, it doesn't actually mean anything. And like, as a judge, I'm like, well, I can't score them highly because number one, I don't understand what they're saying. Number two, it doesn't meet any of the criteria anyway. So like, they've just written all this stuff for naught. And I just felt like, wow, that's so symptomatic of maybe what customers are going through. Like there's so much value in being able to communicate clearly what you and your offering does, regardless of length. If you can say it in 3 words, sure. If it takes a paragraph, even better. That's the variable. And I think sometimes these people hire copywriters based on a per word length, and they think that the more words the better, and or the less words the cheaper it will be. And I'm like, this doesn't. It's kind of like using the wrong metric almost, if you know what I mean. Anyway, I found that really interesting. So yeah, I completely agree with what you just said.
Absolutely. I think if people are using that per word, like cents per word mindset or dollar per word mindset, I think they're still outsource it to ChatGPT. Seriously. Like if you're looking for volume, go to ChatGPT. I don't have another economical. Yeah. I initially started out over 8 years ago. I initially started out writing for a content mill, so I know what it feels like to be ChatGPT. But there is no incentive for a writer to write well when you put a cent per word. And so this is why again ChatGPT is taking over these poor jobs, because they're looking for volume. They're looking for the volume of output versus writing better faster. So ChatGPT can help you do both. You want to use it to help you write better faster, and not just volume. Volume has always been a problem. People judge the effects of marketing based on lead volume, when lead volume means nothing really, or the content, the effectiveness of the content agency by output, by volume, and not necessarily, how did these actually convert? How did this actually bring us closer to our goals? So if they're looking for volume, find ChatGPT is the best thing. Quick, it's almost free, go for it. But if you're looking for stuff that's actually has that idea, has that strategy built into it that's going to help move the needle, then you need to look to work with a professional.
On that note, and that was my last question around the rise of ChatGPT and sort of text. Like, I know you've alluded to this a bit on social media because I was reading it, but I found that the biggest misgiving is that it can't do research for you. You can't figure out what your customers are saying for you by default. And a lot then depends on how you use these tools, and what sort of prompts you put in as well. So I find it's a tactical tool. It can be pretty powerful. At times it can sort of bleed into that strategic sort of higher order piece, but it really takes quite a skilled operator, I find, to be able to get the most out of it. And even then, there's massive holes, I find, that can point you in completely the wrong direction. What's your sort of take on this now, and then perhaps where it's heading in the future?
I think the biggest thing for all AI tools across the board, if you don't have experience in the field, it looks like magic. And I get that. Mid-journey, I don't get design. I have a designer friend and she's like, it's good, but, so she's a professional designer, so I get it. And for me, ChatGPT, it's like, it's good, but, because I understand what writing, it's the problem I think with ChatGPT that a lot of people, Mid-journey, is that it looks very convincing. It produces the results in a way that makes it feel that this is confident, like this is it. But it doesn't take into account all the different variables that a flesh and blood copywriter or a flesh and blood designer is actually going to take into account when creating it. Yes, for the lowest price bidders on Upwork and Fiverr, yeah, it's probably replacing them, because all they're doing again is kind of chopping and changing what they find on what they find anyway for free online. So it is replacing that. It's good to help you get out of a rut. It's good if you're looking to seed an idea. What I often find is that I'll write a few headlines, I'll put it in to ChatGPT and I'll say, give me another variation of these. And I won't like any of the variations, but the fact that I didn't like them means, oh, now I know what I want to write. So it did the bad writing for me. There's this kind of thing in it does the bad designing for you. So that's not the direction I want to go in. This is the one I do want to go in. So I think that's one of the most powerful things, because the most difficult thing for any writer has always been the battle of the blank page. It's that getting started. It's that first draft. You have to pour your soul into the page before you actually get to wrangle out that first draft is so hard. But even if you can put in prompt or put in something into ChatGPT and you don't use anything of what it spits out, you've got something on the page and you immediately go, well, that's not right. So I delete that. Well, that section could make sense. Let's move it up here. Let's do it. So you start playing it with it like a jigsaw puzzle. It's like a jigsaw. They gave you all the pieces. So you start doing that and you go, well, that doesn't make sense. So that's not the right value prop, but cross that out and I'll insert something else. And then you start building. You can build much, much, much faster that way. If you're looking, but then again, for those mind numbing tasks, I once had to write 200 Google Word variations. This was before ChatGPT existed, so I had to do it by hand, and it was torture. But now I could have said, okay, well, give me some more variations of this. Do it, check it. Yeah, that's fine, and that was okay, because you need that volume as well. If you're bidding on so many different keywords, that's fine. You can do that. Like, it's great for those things. You have a set of ideas. Let it spin up some variations for you. That's the kind of mind-numbing work that it should be automating. What it shouldn't be automating is the seeding of the idea for you. And a lot of people are saying, well, it looks like magic. It seems to be thinking, I'm going to use it to think for me. And that's, I think, the problem where we're falling in it. Again, we all have a bias against work. We all want things to be easy. We always want to have more leisure time. We always want to expend less energy. We all have that. It's fine. It's part of human nature. But there's a lot to be said for doing that creative work. So ChatGPT, it doesn't do brand voice well. It doesn't do brand positioning well. It doesn't do that strategy element well. And it can't do research in real time. Even if you have ChatGPT 4, fine, but you have to fact check everything, because it still hallucinates. And for me personally, to get something that's terrible and then for me to have to go and double and backtrack and fact check or validate everything, that takes me more time than writing from scratch. For someone who doesn't know how to write, and it gives them that starting point, then fine, and that's worth it for them to direct it. But for someone who has experience in writing, that's all I do every day. It actually would take me more time to try and use an output from ChatGPT and make it suitable than it would be to actually write it from scratch. So I think there is immense value in these tools. Again, as I mentioned, help you write better, faster. It does that first bad draft for you, so you can actually write quicker. So you know, well, that's not what I want to say, and actually kicks you into thinking, well, what do I want to say? Helps the synthesis of information happen faster in your own brain. But it doesn't mean you can take what it says and run with it, because you have to validate it somehow. We're not in that stage. And even if it says it taps into the internet, again, it hallucinates. It still comes up with things that aren't relevant. I'd rather just shortcut that time, go to the customer first, take that and put that on the page, rather than use a tool. Again, as a writer, that's easy for me to do. For someone who doesn't know, find an early stage startup with no customers yet, gives you an MVP, about us description, fine, it's great. It's very helpful for situations where you have almost no budget, and where you just need good enough. But when you need more than good enough, when you need more than an MVP version or something, then it would be better to work with a human.
Good answer. So in summary, ChatGPT is on mushrooms. It hallucinates way too much.
It does a lot, and a surprising amount. I think the other thing is, again, it goes very high level, which is good. But then if it's giving you output that's at a high level and not on a deep level of expertise, then everyone's getting output at high level. So everyone's going to be publishing the same content. So you're getting more of the same, and it's actually only helping the more differentiated content, more differentiated copying and strategy actually rise to the top. It's making a bigger, again, it's separating. They think, well, we publish more. It's, again, volume. When Content Mills came out, great, I can pay a writer $2 and they'll write me a 500-word SEO optimized article, but it's just more of the same, and no one actually reads them. They just sit there dead on the internet, instead of this actual content, this actual interesting content that's good to read actually just rises to the top. And anyway. So it is very, very useful.
No, I completely agree.
It's tricky. It's tricky.
Yeah. But I'm with you on the sort of like ideation phase, showing you what you don't want. Yeah, maybe giving you a synopsis that you can then sort of run with, and then it gives you that starting point, that leg up. Sometimes that you need if you got a writer's block, whatever. But yeah, really good. That was really fascinating. I just got 5 more questions to go, and then I'll let you go and start your day. Is there a book you're reading right now or have read recently? It can be on this topic or related, that has really changed your thinking for the better.
I've been reading lately The Hero and the Outlaw. It's all about diving deep into brand archetypes. So I didn't used to use them a lot before, but I've been finding that in terms of helping a brand to find its positioning and tone of voice, usually what we end up with is sometimes a company will hire a visual identity or a visual branding team or visual marketing team, and then they'll also hire a writing team, and then what they do is not aligned. So you'll have really cool graphics and the copy will be very static, or you'll have really funky copy but the graphics will be really boring. So there's often this huge disconnect between the two, and I find just bringing in the notion of brand archetypes is something that helps give. It doesn't wholly define a brand, but it gives guardrails as to the direction that the company from a brand perspective is going in. So that makes sure that the tone of voice is aligned with the visual identity, which I think is really, really crucial, because people know when you get to a site and everything is off. You can feel it. You feel when there's no consistency. And again, I think a lot of what happens in terms of driving conversions, it's not just the copy, and of course it's never just the design, but it's the total sum of information that's presented concisely on the page. So it's how the images and the copy fit together. It's that total sum of information, that total sum of what's on the page is what helps drive conversions. And so coming from an anthropological background, there are types of characters and things in life, in the stories we hear growing up, that these types of archetypes that appear that are cross-cultural. So you'll have there's concepts of heroes in every culture, there's concepts of jesters in every culture, there's a concept of rebellion in every culture. These are cross-cultural things that speak to everyone and everyone can relate to, because we all understand them, even if you don't, but if you don't use it in words, even without words. So by tapping into that, you're able to help evoke as well some types of emotions, a type of connection with the brand, to show your customers what you stand for, as well as a brand perspective. So it's a subtle way of communicating your why without saying this is our why, and then explaining it in words. So again, it gives that direction. It helps with brand differentiation, and then it adds an extra flavor to that tone of voice, and it ensures that alignment between the two. So I've just been delving into that a lot lately, and I just find it fascinating.
What you said there around brand, I think that's what gets missed is, whenever I do or oversee a brand strategy, I always make sure there's like the visual identity and verbal identity, and then all the other sort of associations in the middle. And I think what gets missed is if you go to a brand design firm, they just do visual identity. That's where most people go. And it's all just logos and colors and fonts, and maybe they'll just do some headlines or something, but it's very not talked about. So I find that sort of higher order messaging piece is definitely excluded from there. And it's so critical, because, at the end of the day, a brand is kind of almost like a person, and that person should look and sound somewhat similar. Like, as you said, there shouldn't be this dichotomy between the two. Otherwise, you're like, what is this person, a schizophrenic? Like, I'm not going to trust them. So yeah, it makes complete sense to me.
Exactly.
That's really good.
Yeah.
What about, you did mention ChatGPT, which is a website, but is there another website that is sort of your secret source, go-to website that helps you do your job better?
The only other one I think would be Reddit. I think I find Reddit an invaluable, because of the layer of anonymity that Reddit gives its users. People feel very comfortable. Of course, you can't know exactly when someone's bluffing, but people feel very. I think again, it's the same idea like with self-serve checkouts, right? So you have self-serve checkouts, and supermarkets were afraid to install them because they, people are just going to steal stuff and walk out. No, a very very tiny percentage of people were still are still conducting thefts, but the self-serve checkouts actually, it didn't have an impact. Actually, more people just, went through and paid for themselves and walked out as you would expect them to. So it's the same kind of thing with Reddit. So even if a very tiny percentage of people are bluffing or making stuff up, because of the anonymity that's there and because of that environment that it gives people to express themselves freely and to communicate with people without getting into who you are or what you look like or where you came from or I know where you live, it lets people open up about a lot of different issues and a lot of different things, and you feel like a real fly on the wall when you're looking at investigating things. I'm working with a cybersecurity company actually at the moment, and I found a whole thread on like what are the buzzwords that you hate the most as in working in cyber, you're in cybersec. What are the buzzwords that you hate the most? And everyone was ranting. It was so furious. It's like, tell me just what it does. Like you could feel the rage from people, and they were like, we don't like this, we don't like this, and so this is so overrated. And people were replying to each other. You can see that's not made up. You can see that's not made up. You can see it's coming from a general place that people generally feel rage against these certain buzzwords that we use in cybersecurity marketing. So it's like, okay, well, exactly you should not be using those words. Take their advice, and that's such an invaluable, that having that knowledge has actually seeded the idea for an entire marketing campaign for this company that hopefully will be coming out this year. Just that understanding that people hate these buzzwords so much. And it's huge. So you can find out such valuable information about what your audience really cares about, even without talking to them.
Is there a favorite quote or even meme about messaging strategy or copywriting that just makes you laugh every time because it's so true?
Not one that I've seen, but there's one that I do remember that there's, I don't even know where it's from. There's like a dad, he's trying to show off this trophy, and he's like, here's the trophy, and there's no trophy on the stand. It's like, this is the trophy that I got, or that trophy I would have got if I'd done the thing, or if I'd participated in the competition. So it's like, this is the website that we wrote using the messaging strategy. Like, there's no website. It's like, if we actually had a messaging strategy, it's like, this is what we wrote. We couldn't write anything without the messaging strategy. I think it's just, it's so hard. And again, having been a junior writer in the past and being tasked with writing a website without having a messaging strategy in place, I just know how difficult it is. You're just clutching at straws because everyone has a different opinion on what should be said and where. There's no clear direction. Everyone wants the same ideas to be on the page, and then the page just turns into this mutated kind of monster. thing, and then no one understands who you are or what you do because it's just all over the place. When you have a clear messaging
That's funny.
strategy,
It's just like
you know what to say in the hero, you know what to say here and there. Yeah.
this tweet the other week around oh, like, don't be worried about AGI because we know clients can't brief anyway. We're safe. And I think it's true. Like, if you don't have that strategy piece, you can't brief somebody to then write something about you because you're just going,
Yeah.
hey, do your job, and then they're asking you questions like, well, what does your product do, and you can't answer it, or who are your customers? Oh, what are they like? Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, like, just that skill of being able to brief, I think, for me, if you can't do that, it means you don't really have a strategy done, and you need to do that right now, because then that will make the
Yeah.
briefing process so much easier, and then all your vendor relationships, they're so much shorter,
Mhm.
so much more efficient, less back and forth communication. Like, just save so much stress, and everyone's like way happier at the end of it.
Absolutely.
But anyway, one of those things. On that, over to you. Can you? What are you promoting today? What do you do if someone's interested in what we're talking about today?
Again, messaging strategy and conversion copywriting for SaaS tech, IT, and IoT companies. So if you have tech, you have software, or you're a tech enabled, product. That's what I work with best. And understanding the human impact of the technology, and then how to communicate with that with your customers. So that's everything from messaging strategy through to actual applications, so website copy, emails, ads, landing pages, all of that good stuff. I'm not promoting anything specific today, but if you're happy to have a follow on LinkedIn if you're interested.
What's the best way to contact you? Just connect on LinkedIn, give you a PM or DM or email, or go to your website. Which one do you prefer?
Email, sorry, LinkedIn is probably the best way to get it. My website's currently under construction, so that would be the best.
We're the same there. And just say that you listen to this episode and you'll get extra special treatment, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just mention, and then yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, I just want to thank you again, Eden, for taking some time out for a very busy Monday morning. So thanks again so much for being on the show, and look forward to talking again soon.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you so much for having me. It was a great conversation. Great speaking with you.